Hello. So in the previous video, we saw how we can create VPCs and subnets. We created a private and public subnet. Now in this video, let's try and create two EC2 instances, one in the public subnet and one in the private subnet, and attach them to the security groups. So let's get started. Click on Services, EC2. Launch instance. I'm selecting the Amazon Linux OS, T2 Micro. Now here I'm going to select my custom VPC. I'm going to create this one in the public subnet, and if you see, the use subnet setting is enabled, so that means that a public IP will be assigned to my instance. I'm going to select the S3 admin role, IAM role for this instance, and all the other things I'm going to keep it as default. I'm not going to add any bootstrap script here. Okay, I'm keeping this storage type as magnetic, and let's go to adding tags. I'll call it as my web server. Now let's create a new security group. I'll call it as my web DMZ. Okay, so I'm adding SSH rule to this security group. So SSH to this server will be enabled, and the source is custom, so I'll keep it as 0.0.0.0/0. So SSH to this server from all the IPs is enabled. And since this is a web server, I'm going to enable HTTP, so port 80 is also enabled. In fact, let me just make this as my IP, so only I can SSH to this server, but everybody else can access it through HTTP. Okay, now let's go to review and launch. Okay, continue with magnetic as the boot volume. Now I'm just reviewing the configuration, and I'll click on launch. I'm just going to create a new key here. And download it, and click on launch instances. So till the time this one is launching, let me just again go to launch instance and create the other one in the private subnet. I'm just going to follow the same steps. The only difference is, instead of public subnet, I'm selecting private subnet here. Now see, the use subnet setting is disabled. That means no public IP will be added to this instance. I'm going to select the IAM role here, and keeping everything else as default. I'm adding the storage, and this will be my DB server. So that goes into my private subnet, and I'm creating a new DMZ security group. SSH from my IP is enabled, and let me add a rule for MySQL. And now here, this is an important part. What we need to do is we have to add the IP address or the CIDR block for our public subnet. So only servers or IP addresses from our public subnet will be able to access this particular subnet, private subnet. So only our web server can talk to the DB server. Nobody else from outside can access the DB server. So going back to my VPC, services or the subnets. You can see the IP for my public subnet is this. So I'm just going to select that and mention it in the CIDR block value here. Review and launch. Again, make boot volume magnetic. Review the settings and click on launch. I'm going to use the same key pair that I selected. I acknowledge and launch instances. Now this is a very quick EC2 instance creation. If you want to go for a more detailed EC2 instance creation, you can watch another video that I have created, and I will paste the link in the description below. So now let's see if both our instances are active. Let's go to the EC2 dashboard. You can see 2 running instances here. Okay, so now both my servers are ready and they are up and running fine. Now let's see how we can access this server from SSH. So my web server here has been assigned with a public IP address, and the DB server is just having a private IP. So let me just copy the public IP and I will access the server from SSH using the public IP, and -I will just mention the key pair file, the .pem file that I had created while creating the instance to access this server. So you see, this is the server in the public subnet, and we can access it using the public IP address. Now, since the DB server that we created, we don't have access to SSH to it, since it does not have a public address. It can only be accessed through the web server. In order to access the servers in the private subnet, we need to configure a bastion host. I will share a separate video for creation of a bastion host and how to access the servers in the private network using the bastion host. So this was the procedure to create your own custom VPC and add EC2 instances into them. Thank you for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, bye.